Hi guys. You've clicked on the title. I'm surprised. Normally I'm just completely ignored. Yay! I'm out here in my backyard in my little tent that I keep up, where I like to sit and enjoy outdoors as much as I can, considering I don't really go much of anywhere. And today out here, I would like to discuss with you why wear Odin's noose when you are an atheist. Yep. First, I want to explain Norse atheism, and I'm going to try to be as short as possible. There's this idea that atheism means that you don't believe in anything whatsoever except science. Except that science can become a religion, as many of us have seen recently. So there goes that. When I first had my belief stripped from me through a spiritual hijacking that I endured very recently, it left me with a completely changed view on the gods. I mean, I still knew that spirits existed, but the gods themselves had been completely misrepresented, and I was floundering. If I had had a spiritual community to lean on and rely on, I probably would not be sitting here today as a spiritual atheist. When I didn't have anywhere to turn to, I turned to accepting that I had lost complete belief in all the gods and in anything like that whatsoever. So I called an atheist friend of mine up. We had a long chat, and I started doing some research. And it turns out that people just don't understand atheism. Being an atheist does not mean that you don't believe that something's out there. It does not mean that you can't revere nature. It doesn't mean that you can't communicate with the spirits. It means that you don't believe in a god in the godly sense. Like, for example, in one of the forums I'm in, some girl had woke up that morning and there was this weird mushroom in her yard. Oh my God gave me this weird mushroom. How cool is this weird mushroom? I could see a spirit that we would call a god influencing the mushroom to grow a certain way, using the weird and the flows, but to attribute every single thing to a god, you are overworking your god for starters. There's a billion people on this planet. Give them a break. But also, that just doesn't make any sense. When you look at just historically with all of our surviving myths and biblical lore and folklore, nowhere does a god actually go around giving you everything. They do little things, and they do what we consider supernatural things, and they influence things, but they aren't standing next to you going, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So being an atheist doesn't mean that you don't believe in the supernatural and don't feel like you can touch the supernatural. I've met many a religious person, Christians especially, that when I bring up the supernatural, they go, well, I'm not entirely convinced. But they're not atheists. They believe in their God. So it's more of a matter of you're looking at the world and you just don't believe in the gods in the way that people would have you believe in the gods. And there are some atheists that don't believe in any of it at all. I happen to be a spiritual atheist. I happen to be part of the pagan community way off on the side because that's as close as I can get to my own people's practice at this time. Being as far as I know, I am the last practitioner. I've probably never going to meet another, as I have said in other videos, as late as Victorian times when you were someone born like me that could speak to spirits up on the reservation, you would quietly disappear. This is documented in a paper by Frank Speck. Look it up. So, only some of the ways survived in the family, only some. And if I meet another, great. It is a little bit of a comfort that spiritual atheism is a lot closer to my people's natural way of being. And I also find it amusing, as I am currently working on a a scholarly paper regarding Loki and Loki's family, I came across a neat paper where somebody was discussing evidence that the Norse also had something similar in their lives. They had 3 words for what they called personal friend. And a personal friend appeared to be a god spirit that was theirs, their personal friend. One documented personal friend was Thor, to a gentleman who passed Thor on to his son. And that happens to be almost a mirror to the way my people, or rather my ancestors, because my tribe's a little bit newer, it's a long story, the way my ancestors used to do when we would have our personal spirits when we became shamanistic practitioners. Interesting, one of the old Algonquian words for medicine man was powwow. So that word now means something else. And the movement for medicine people that's out now, that has a very large, practically a church following, comes more out of the West and isn't quite where I come from. So one of the things I tell people is that, besides the eavesdropping neighbors behind me, aren't they great? Oh yeah, this neighborhood's great for that. So one of the things that I tell people is that I wear Odin's noose. Now, what do I mean by that? During my spiritual hijacking, I was approached by many entities that came forward, and a few of them came forward as if they were the Norse gods. The one who presented himself as Odin in particular, they're coming to me as someone who had looked at Norse stuff, liked Norse stuff when she was a child. There was Norse ancestry in the family. Some of those ways followed down. I learned later, so that my upbringing was literally a blend of 2 cultures. And it was just really neat to see so many things survive. But that I hadn't really cared to look into the deeper things, because I would have nothing to do with Odin. I had met one too many of his followers that were negative, and I just didn't want anything to do with it. So that when this entity came forward, he came forward in such a way that it was like, okay, I will go with this. And he said he needed this thing. I said, okay, I will go with this. And I fell into this test, you could say. The test involved a whole lot of negativity from outside entities, and I was literally fought over. I will talk about that in another video. Now that it's done and over, whenever I look into something, one thing I find really interesting is that I have spoken with other Norse pagans, and I was told that other people who have been approached by Odin got stabbed by his spear, whereas I was not stabbed by his spear. I was welcomed into a cave grotto and spoken with actual sentences. And then one day I, out of boredom, clicked a video about Wodan, which is the Germanic version, and discovered that my Odin had presented himself in a more Germanic way. And that might be why I didn't get stabbed by his spear. It does indeed point to that I might have been approached by the real Wodan. But I still no longer believe that he could be the kind of entity the way people think that he is. Coming out of a spiritual hijacking is like breaking a spell. So that you're left reaching for the spirits that you're used to communing face to face, back on a level 0 where you're doing candles and spells and goblets, and you're back to the craft, but level 0 with baby bumpers on, and it's incredibly distasteful. But the point is that it expects you to work on faith, and I personally don't work on faith. And I feel that if the gods were truly all-powerful enough to approach me before, then they're all-powerful enough to continue whenever I decide that I need to go see them, which is not often. I have a lot of things to do. I don't need to go visit them every day, no more than I want you crawling up my butthole and living in my living room practically. You know, unless you live here, please don't. I can't keep cleaning up after you. I've got a living to make. When I look at how people discuss how they see Odin versus how I saw Odin versus how, say, another person see Odin, people say, oh, it's different aspects, it's different perspectives, it's your subconscious speaking to them. Now, I do believe in the power of perspective, which I mentioned in my last video. That is going to dictate a little bit of what goes on. But then there's some outright stuff that is just clearly all them that they choose. One thing I know about spiritual hijackings is that when a spirit is faking a god, and that, by the way, we have an epidemic in this country right now of this. It's a huge epidemic. If you want to know more about that, I recommend that you step away from the spirituality and begin by looking into the alien love bite, and also the work of Dr. Turner. She was a ufologist who made a lot of ground in the early days. So the power of perspective does indeed affect it, but there's also the fact that the entity that's approaching me as Odin may not be the same entity that's approaching you as Odin. And the negative entities especially, and mine I'm pretty sure was not negative, but the negative entities especially will grab pop culture references. The plague of Lokis across the country, of people who are seeing Loki, but he's coming to them as the movie Loki. And then they start discussing how he's teasing them and he disappears on them, and they're distraught and confused, and I'm pretty sure those are not beneficial Lokis. I'm pretty sure those are negative beings, because the beneficial ones would never do you that way. They want to lift you up because what you put out when you're lifted up is good for them. Your Odin may not be my Odin. I can't say for sure that there is one all-powerful king of the gods, Odin. I can't. But I can tell you that I dealt with a spiritual entity who sat in a hall, asked me to come, had me escorted by now what I know was this work, which I didn't even know these things existed until after the fact, and asked me to be a poet for him. To turn back time is what he said, but through the course of the conversation, and I accepted. And that's how I wear Odin's noose. What I'm saying is that I'm still following a skaldic-ish path. I say skaldic-ish because with no community support and no connections or anything, I'm having to kind of learn on my own and do things on my own. So I'm doing what I can while also looking into Scyther, because a spirit who presented herself as Freya has been there with me still. And Scyther is another one of the arts, and from what I've seen is really close to what I need to learn for my own path. So to wear Odin's noose as a spiritual atheist, or to, I don't know, or to follow Freya, or to honor Thor, or even to love Loki, basically means that you're looking at at what they represent. Odin is wisdom and knowledge. He's the wanderer, and I do tend to wander, like you could tell in the video. And most importantly, with the meat of poetry, his worth, his path, what he represents, all of that aligns with me and what I was already doing, so that when Odin approached me, it was pretty much like a match. Same thing with Loki. I love Loki, and I love his wit. I love that he could make you laugh. Even as a spiritual atheist, having been stripped of the belief that there is one all Loki, that is the Loki, the quintessential Loki. There's probably a whole bunch of little Lokis running around. I'm Loki and I'm Loki, just like there's a whole lot of little Pauls and a whole lot of little Darlas and a whole lot of little Jessicas out there. Doesn't mean that I can't work with my Loki or my Odin. And if my Loki or my Odin turns out to be the Loki or the Odin, well, aren't I a lucky, lucky Goyle? And that's why I can honestly tell you that, yes, I wear Odin's noose. Yes, I love Loki. Yes, Freya's the best auntie a girl could have. While at the same time knowing that I'm an atheist. And if you're in this boat, I hope that you're comforted knowing that it's all it really is you're coming back down to a spiritual, tribal point of view. In a way, you're actually closer to how my people believed before the first ships came to the shores, because we would work with our personal friends. The fact is that communing with nature and the spirits needs to come first anyway, because this is where we stand. The spirits are our neighbors, they're our friends, and whenever we walk outside, we stand on grass or hopefully in wildflowers, and amongst the trees, hopefully, or amongst the desert and the cacti or whatever, something that's not astroturf. And that's our first line that we see and touch. And even if the gods are real, they're out there and we're down here. And we have this sphere that we live in, that we interact in, that is a really good idea if we respect it. So if you believe in your deities as the one deity, great. If you see things the way I see them, wonderful. I do want to point out that if you're coming to me telling me how wrong I am about the deities, then you're telling me that I was personally chosen by Odin to be a poet. So choose your words wisely. And if you're telling me that I'm making up fiction, then either you believe in your gods or you don't. I don't really care either way. I'm fortunate that mine went back to the original ways of my people, or close to it, because there's no knowing precisely how it was. But I'm fortunate in that, and maybe that was meant to be. Maybe that was what was supposed to happen. But I invite to hear how you feel and believe, respectfully. I'm told to ask you to subscribe for more myth skeptic content, but I am not a skeptic. I just have a different way of viewing it. So I'm going to stop talking now.